Thank you so much, Renee. My name is Evan, adult child. Welcome, everybody. It's so good to see you here. So good to be part of this process and this journey. And I really appreciate Renee not only asking me to share, but giving me plenty of plenty of heads up, plenty of weeks to prepare and to think about it, take some notes, and get nervous, and take a deep breath, and get nervous again, and go through that whole process. I'm going to start with the reparenting check-in worksheet in the Loving Parent Guidebook. I realize this is being recorded for a podcast. I rely heavily on ACA podcasts. I just love them, especially during those times where some of my historical trauma that I'll share with you about surfaces in the middle of the night, and I have trouble getting back to sleep. So I'll turn on a podcast or some other recovery resource and use that to get my nervous system back into its calm and peaceful state. So let's go ahead and start. You can close your eyes, take a deep breath. First step is grounding. What physical sensations, including your breath and emotions, do you notice? Allow yourself to experience them. And this is the worksheet on Appendix C, so it has a place for me to write down my breath is, and I'll share a little bit about my own current state. Typically, my breath is shallow. I find that under times of stress, I don't breathe fully. So being reminded to take a deep breath, do a count, 1, 2, 3, 4 on the exhale. Inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4. I notice physical sensations. I've got some trembling going on in my body, a little bit nervous about doing a share, extended share. It tends to come up in trembling around my shoulders and my neck. So I'm breathing into that. I'm feeling that. I feel emotions, some of the nervousness, excitement. It's so wonderful to be able to have the extended share, to be able to talk in depth at length. Next step is number two, who? Who in your inner family needs your loving parent's attention? Check all that apply, inner child, inner teenager, or don't know. I find that as I've done this work and gotten in touch with my inner child, that tends to be the part of me that is just excited. The world is awesome, full of awe, and a little bit fearful. The inner teenager is the one that's adapting to other people outside my family structure, can be a little bit rebellious, a little bit uh, more seeking to fit in with other kids. And number three, what? What activated this part of you? Notice your self-talk. Check all that apply. Critical parent, distorted thinking, people, places, or things, or don't know. And it has a suggestion, describe briefly. Example, my critical parent projected a scary future that scared my inner child. Of course, I'm a little bit nervous about what I'm sharing here today. I'll work through that. That's what's activated part of me. Sometimes in meetings, I like to share that I am in between the grief process. I've gone through some grieving in the past, changes in my life that I'll share about, and I know that there are changes up and coming. The grief process comes and goes. I've been able to access some of the unprocessed grief from my childhood. That was a new concept when I came to ACA. It's been an important process to release that. Number four, tend. Once you're feeling compassionate, curious, and connected toward the part of you that needs your loving parent's attention, how can you tend to them? Empathize with their feelings and needs, not the story or distorted thinking. It's got some examples here. Example, I see how scared you feel and how you need some reassurance that you'll be safe. And for me, typically what I would do is I would start journaling. That helps me to connect and get it all laid out. Just like when I need to go to the grocery store, I'm thinking, oh, I need 15 items, and I write it down, and I only need three, and it's so much more manageable. I've got a journaling template that I start my day with. I tend to hit a Zoom meeting in the morning and then go to work, and then later I take a break, maybe do another Zoom meeting, do a yoga class that helps me get through the day. That's part of my daily process and how I tend to the daily cycle. There are times where during the day I tend to my inner parts, my inner state, and I'm feeling great, and then I crash. Um, that's normal. There's waves that go through the day, depending on uh, triggers, depending on what comes up. So reassure and nurture. Example: I won't leave you alone with these feelings. Let's breathe together. It's going to be okay. I may need to get up and go for a walk. That's what I love about the Zoom meetings is that I can turn off my video, I can put on my headphones, and I can walk and listen. I can go for a bike ride and listen. Do they need anything else? Comforting touch, guidance, or a gentle internal boundary? Example, a self-hug. This is not the same situation in the past. Let's stay here in this moment. Allow yourself time to be in conscious contact with this part of you. Presence is also empathy. So that's the chapter 9 reparenting check-in. I appreciate your walking through that with me. So I'll share a little bit of my story. I've shared a little bit about my daily process of what I go through, and especially as it extends into the middle of the night when some of this surfaces, when everything that I've gone through during the day affects me. My journey in ACA started in 2020 in January, right before the pandemic hit the world. I walked into my first in-person meeting. I was given the little silver welcome coin that I still have and the welcome pamphlet, which is full of notes and notes and notes in the margin. So I was fortunate to be able to connect to all the Zoom meetings and begin this process. So over the last 4+ years, uh, so I have a history in 12-step recovery dating back to when I was pretty young, when I was 21 years old, back in 1984. Give you an idea of my age. So decades of 12-step recovery. But my introduction to ACA, I heard somebody talking about it in the 12-step rooms, but the phrase never really made sense to me. The whole adult child. It wasn't until a few other things happened in my life that I guess the stage was right. My curiosity was enough, and my pain was enough to walk into these rooms. So in 2020, I went into my first meeting. Fortunate to be able to do lots and lots of Zoom meetings. There was a time during the pandemic where I could have basically no social contact, no in-person contact, and that was really difficult. So the Zoom meetings have been just an absolute lifesaver. The podcasts have been a lifesaver. Um, Part of my two big things happen in my recovery process. Uh, is I write out a timeline. This is kind of fun to do. Is I write out a timeline going back over like the last 10 years. Um, I went through a divorce in 2014. 2015, I was pretty severely injured. I had to deal with that. 2016, my dad passed away. 2017, I had a major job change. 2018, my mom passed away. My kids moved out of my house. They went off to college. 2019, I sold that house and downsized. 20 years of living there and raising kids there. 2020 pandemic, getting to ACA, 2021, um, things started to open back up again, was able to start doing some more travel. So as I write down each of these years on my timeline, just all these major changes going on, as well as the internal changes. I remember talking to my youngest son Um, and I said, things are going well on the outside. It's the internal parts of it that I'm working on. And that was a pretty vulnerable admission to him, that I'm going through this internal upheaval. For those of you who've lost your parents, my heart goes out to you. That's never easy. Losing people just in general is never easy. As I've gotten in touch with my ability to grieve, I grieve just on a daily, weekly cycle. Even when we close a meeting, there's that grief process. There's that. That meeting was just wonderful. It was just such an awesome experience. And then there's that quiet. Just I need time to go do some grief there. So let me talk about some of the process that I've gone through over the last 4 years in ACA. That's really helped get me through some of those changes. Um, so I'm trying to think about what was the most significant. Having lots of Zoom meetings, connecting with some of you here. Um, I think one of the things that's been unique about ACA, ACOA are the book study groups and getting involved with people and doing the Yellow Step workbook, doing the new Loving Parent Guidebook. And typically what would happen there is we'd spin out a group of 4 or 5 people and we'd do some in-depth work. And I would juggle several of those working groups and have a close circle of friends to do that work. That's been really helpful. Something that I haven't done as much in other 12-step recovery, but it's there. I've done a little bit of that. So the work study groups have been really helpful. Um, I was introduced to the concept of the inner child, and that's been an unusual one. I have also done work with the IFS parts. That helps me as well because I can say a part of me has this reaction. A part of me is very critical of something I've done, whatever role that is, whether it's critical parent, inner teen, inner child, whoever's reacting there. I had some trouble getting a hold of my inner child part, and they talk about doing the non-dominant handwriting, but I just couldn't really get very far with that. And it was actually somebody in this group um, that helped me with that. She showed me an example of her um, non-dominant handwriting, and I said, "That's amazing. How did you do that?" And she said, "I traced the letters." And it's like that never occurred to me. So I started doing that. I realized that my inner child, there are parts of me that are so frozen, so very young, because of early childhood trauma, that is basically preschool, right? I had to relearn the alphabet. So I started tracing the alphabet with my non-dominant hand, and what happened was I was just hit with a wall of grief, just like a freight train. I just started sobbing. So I've been able to progress through some of the non-dominant handwriting, um, and then I also did the inner child puppet workshop. That's been really helpful too. So if you're not familiar with that, I think you can find it on the ACA website or in the Team Up calendar. And what I did there was the sock puppet work, where I'd have one hand would be the loving parent, the other hand would non-dominant hand would be the inner child, and I'd have a conversation there, and that was just amazing. It as I would tell other people about my experience, I would say it was like a time machine, like going back, um, like some of those time travel movies that you see. I was able to go back and be there alongside my inner child, and he would show me things that I had forgotten. I had very happy childhood at times. There were just some wonderful moments as a kid. A lot of times those were just off on my own, or we had dogs growing up. I'd be out exploring the woods with my dogs. and I was able to travel back uh, through that inner child work. Uh, what came up with uh, to me was a T-shirt idea that I'm sure some ACA fellow travelers can relate to, and the T-shirt says, "My abusive dad took me to Disneyland." To me that just it sums up so much of it because there were so many good times. I mean, I grew up in Southern California and we went to Disneyland, but there was always that element of fear, that always that element like step out of line at Disneyland, get smacked around. So there's that conflict. It was a good childhood at times. As I entered adulthood, I thought I had a typical, a normal childhood, but it really wasn't. As I come into these rooms and share about it, there were so many things, so many elements of abuse that in my parenting. I mentioned being a parent. I've got two adult boys. In my parenting, the things that happened when I was a child would result in protective services being called, right? There are things that the times have changed, fortunately. Um, so yeah, there was that step out of line, get physically punished at a level that was extremely harsh. So I began to realize this the so-called normal childhood wasn't all that normal. And as I looked into the ACA, the adult child literature, it's like there it began to be described. So I don't want to dwell too much in the past. I like to keep my shares focused on the solution, on the recovery tools. But I've also found that as I've listened to some podcasts, listened to some other speakers' shares, when somebody shares something um, related to their childhood trauma. Sometimes it unlocks a feeling in me. I'll have an internal tension and they'll share about it and I'll go, oh, that's it. And then my heart goes out to them and I identify so much more strongly with them. And I've been amazed at some of the speaker shares that I've heard where people, I see them as a fully functioning adult. I see them going about their adult life and embracing their emotions and everything that being an adult involves. And then they share about some of their childhood traumas. And I'm like, wow, that's amazing. It's amazing that some of us are still here and able to function. Um, as I was taking some notes and getting ready for this talk and was watching the Olympics. And like in Olympic gymnastics, they assign a score on how well they do multiplied by the difficulty. So for me, there's some things that are like, oh, doing the laundry today, that's a difficulty of 5. There are some times where it's like, I've got to recognize the difficulty of just getting through some of the day-to-day stuff. So I like that. I like the um, assigning not just a score on how well I'm doing, but what was the difficulty of it. So, yeah, a little bit about some of the childhood traumas that I've discovered. As I mentioned, my parents were basically untrained parents. There weren't as many parenting resources as there are today. And when I raised my boys, fortunately, my wife was very attuned to attachment parenting, and she was involved in the La Leche League and nursed them very much in giving the child what they needed. My first child was very high need, and we had our plan was for her to go back to work and put the kid in daycare. And first day I went to pick up the kid from daycare, and he was just sobbing. He was just soaked. Little kid was just he'd been crying like all day. And we just said, Can't do this to him. So she was able to stay home with him, and he was the kind of kid. He was a wearable kid. He was the kind of kid that you would put in the little baby bundler and just wear him everywhere. And that's what he needed. So, you know, um, we were able to give him what he needed, and that was okay. So we learned about parenting, and one of the notes that I put down here, one of the things that I don't want to say I struggle with it, but it's something that I still witness today. I was traveling through an airport and I saw this woman traveling solo. She's trying to get somewhere. She's in an airport. She's got the luggage cart, and her kid is just having a complete meltdown. And I'm sitting there pretty far away watching this, far enough away that I don't think she would feel like she was in judgment. But you know how it is, if you've been there either as a witness um, or as a parent, it's like it's one of those areas where I look at it and I was watching it going, How should she handle this?" As a parent myself, I remember when my firstborn son was just laying on the floor in a grocery store, just having a complete meltdown. There's this little puddle of a kid just laying there throwing a tantrum, and I'm just looking at people, going, "All right, I got to put out some yellow cones here. You're gonna have to go around this kid because he's having a meltdown." And feeling judged by all these other parents, but it's like, you know, um, what should I do as a parent? I've got some choices. Do I bear down on that kid, or do I allow it? Some people might say, "Oh, you're being too permissive." I know that the kid's grandparents, I had to deal with that. My wife and I had to deal with that. Um, that judgment. What's the right thing to do for the child in that circumstance? And they wouldn't know that the reason why my kid is having a meltdown is because we skipped an aisle in the grocery store that he wanted to go down. He saw something, I'm going through, I've got a list of, I've got an agenda. I've got things to pick up at the grocery store. Meanwhile, my kid is having a meltdown because we skipped an aisle and he wanted to go down there, and I could learn to be flexible as a parent and say, that's all right. We'll go down there. We'll go check it out. And so I had to adapt. Our first child was very high need. Our second child was quite a bit different. It's funny how kids turn out. I have an older brother, so I was raised two siblings. Older brother, he's quite different as far as the personality. It's just fascinating to me to look at how kids are some blend of their parents. That's one of the things that as part of my recovery is I'm handed some traits from my parents and from their parents and from their parents. We talk about the intergenerational aspect of this. I'm handed that bundle. It's passed from generation to generation. So we had two kids. They're each quite different. As I mentioned, they're adult boys now. I'm very close with them. I remember sharing with them just how proud of them I am as an adult, as a dad, of who they are. Uh, because that's something that it was a need for me to express that. It was something that I never heard growing up. And Lord knows I tried, of course. So I had an older brother, um, and unfortunately, so let me share it this way. I was doing the work, I was reading, and in a study group. doing the Pete Walker book on complex PTSD and sharing some of what I learned about that with my older brother. And he said he made amends. He basically said that he realizes that he was a part of that. He was a part of my experience growing up. And I said, you know, that's okay. I realize now that basically he was just part of the pecking order. The dad comes home from work, he's stressed out from his boss. He takes it out on the kids. The older brother takes it out on the younger brother. There's just that unfortunately there was that pecking order of being smaller and weaker. Um, so there's that. That was part of my experience growing up. Um, it it was really funny. My dad, he moved us out to he got a job, he moved us out to the countryside and bought a kit home. He bought some land and a kit home, and this is the type of thing that arrives on two semi trucks, and you get to unload all the pieces and you get to prepare the land and build a home. It's like, wow, what an experience. Unfortunately, I think I was like 8 years old when we started. So I was like pretty young for this. And uh, my dad was saying, I moved you boys out to the countryside, but I still couldn't avoid the evils of the big city. And I said, yeah, I know, Dad. I knew exactly what he was referring to. And I said, yeah, Dad, you still couldn't keep my older brother away from muscle cars. Because my older brother was a big fan of muscle cars in the 70s. He liked to work on him. He liked to work on them. Unfortunately, there was an incident where he got injured working on it. He was under it, and I rescued him. So I don't want to trigger anyone, but he's alive and well today. I think I was about 15 years old. I think I had my learner's permit, and I had to take him to the emergency room. And um, you know, it's certainly not my parents' fault. It's just the circumstances. It's just the situation. Uh, but what was interesting to me is that on the drive home, and I have to remember, how young my parents were back then. This was the mid 70s. I think about when I was their age and having to deal with this. But on the drive home, what I remember is getting my brother to the hospital, and I remember the drive home. I don't really remember too much about that. But on the drive home, my dad just ripped into me. And he was calling me names. He was basically abusing me um, out of his own fear. There's no reason for that. I rescued my brother. He was telling me I didn't do it right, which is it's just baffling, right? To this day, it doesn't make sense. And of course, I internalized that. I remember being curled up in a ball, just sobbing. And that's the core definition of trauma. It's just an overwhelm of the nervous system. It's an overwhelming of my ability to make sense of the world. So that's one of the uh, major events that I've had to process and release from my body somatically. So I want to talk about that. There was a really good daily meditation that came out. I subscribe to the WSO meditations. If you don't have those, you get those every day in email. It's a quote from the Big Red Book, page 622. There are as well ways to describe the manifestation of two therapeutic ideals: no excess tension in the body and a neutral reaction to symbolic associations and mental representations of trauma. So I can still relate that story to you. I can feel the feelings that surface of it, and I know that I'm okay today, that I can reparent that. Um, you know, uh, doing the inner child work. I mentioned doing the puppet work and the fact that I could go there and be with that child, that teenager that experienced that. Uh, and I heard somebody say that if there had been an adult advocate alongside me through those years, the experience would not have been traumatic. If I had somebody that I could turn to, and I had somebody that I could talk to, and I had somebody that could comfort me, which is the role of a parent, I would not have experienced trauma. And that was really powerful to me, because unfortunately the circumstances were that I did experience that. There was a lot of um, parental experiences that my wife, I mentioned the attachment parenting. And I've heard it said that anything that's less than nurturing is a form of abuse. So there was a lot of abuse by definition that happened. So I can do the work. I can go back. I can be alongside the child. I can grieve it. I can cry it. It's okay to cry about it here, and I can release that tension that's in my body. Um, Talking the other day, I have a study group that I really enjoy. We explore other literature associated with ACA recovery. We do some books that outside the big red book and the yellow book and the Loving Parent Guidebook. I love those, but we explore other books. And one of the themes that came up that I've got highlighted here is what is the most important thing that I can teach my kids and my inner kids. And I was sharing an example where I was around someone else's child. It wasn't my child. I was just there as an observer. And his older sibling, his stepbrother, was being really what I thought inappropriate. It was basically bullying him. And so I was watching this, just wondering, what was my place here? Should I say anything? Should I come to the defense of the younger kid? And I was noting, and we were discussing his resilience, and that was a key word there. So he was able to take um, the bullying because it was a mild form of the older kid was he was basically teasing him and taunting him, trying to get an emotional reaction. And the little guy was okay with it. He was used to it, or he had adults in his life that he could talk to about it. And I think that's key. Uh, and what we were envisioning it as is like a tennis match, where someone, hits a tennis ball at you, and that's that emotional, they're looking for a reaction. And his ability to just return that ball, just hit it right back. So I didn't know if it was my place to say anything, and that's one of the areas that I work on. One of my laundry list traits is just that do I speak up or do I not? I've spoken up in the past, and uh, one of the other areas of ACA that I've learned and I really like to explore is the other laundry list traits. And it's interesting to me in the Big Red Book that they introduce it. They talk very briefly about it. It's just barely a page long from what I remember. And I don't really know the origins of who put together the other laundry list, which is really more the victimizer role, somebody who's looking for that emotional reaction. But it's so well put together. So I wanted to mention the other laundry list, just because it's been really helpful in my own recovery and dealing with those types of people. Uh, that type of conflict that I grew up with. So um, I am often faced with that choice. do I respond and what's the appropriate response? So that's part of my recovery. So let me just wrap up in talking about some of the other tools that I use in my recovery. I appreciate that ACA recovery is so somatic. I practice yoga pretty much every day. I use the breath work in there. During the pandemic, one of the yoga classes that I was fortunate to attend was an hour class on breath work alone. It was just amazing. It was one of the most life-changing experiences I've ever had. And when I first started doing it, we started doing some of the breathing exercises. I found that I wanted to run from the room. It's like, what the heck? They start, take a deep breath, exhale slowly, count, take another deep breath, and I would just find these feelings of panic surfacing, and it was everything I could do just to stay in the room. And I would just have to ask myself, it's like, okay, so play it through. You run out of the room, you're in the locker room, now what? So I would stay in the room and I would work through that. So um, just absolutely powerful, powerful stuff. There's a gentleman by the name of Wim Hof. He has some YouTube videos, and I would find that when I would awake in the middle of the night and I'd have these feelings of panic, I would have these just intense emotional pain surfacing. It's just the type of pain that you've probably experienced it if you're here, where it just seems like too much, and I just can't. It's like I can't handle this. I need to get up and move. I would fire up those YouTube videos and do the breathing exercises. Those have been really, really helpful. All sorts of other somatic work, dance, yoga, all that good stuff. Getting on my bike. Uh, the other thing that's really been helpful are the study groups. I like the format that we use where we would have uh, some readings, listen to a meditation check-in from somebody like Sarah Blondin, Dr. Margaret Paul, and then we would check in. We'd do like a 1 or 2 minute share, then we'd do some reading, and then we'd do some journaling and do some additional sharing. Really good study group format. I am going to wrap up here with a friend of mine gave me a book. It's called Recovery, a Guide for Adult Children of Alcoholics. And there's a final note. Note that this is not ACOA approved. It is just a book on adult children, written in 1985. Um, so this stuff goes way back to the beginnings of my 12-step recovery. But this is the final note from the authors. It says, we'd like to leave you with one last thought. When alcoholism starts in a family, it moves through the generations. The person who becomes the alcoholic marries the person who becomes the co-alcoholic. Together they have children who themselves often become alcoholic or marry an alcoholic. These adult children will also get married, often to an alcoholic or co-alcoholic. They will have children, and so the cycle repeats. When recovery occurs, it too is carried through the generations. Everyone has the potential to move through the stages of recovery, and while we each move at our own rate, recovery itself becomes progressive. Once started, propelling us forward. You can start a new generation of recovery in your family's history. Know it, feel it, believe it, and you can make it happen. So, with that, I thank you. Such a great opportunity, and I just love the format of this meeting and the people who do service, and what I've been able to receive from the shares here. So I will pass. Thank you.